Hey everybody, it's Saul. It's your friend from the internet. I'm excited today. We're here with Chris Brogan. Holy mackerel, Chris Brogan. I've known Chris for probably more than a decade, and
Yeah.
he has been someone that I care for deeply, someone I respect madly, and just an all around good guy. And it's funny, we were going to do this conversation yesterday. It was scheduled, and of course when we booked it, we didn't know, ahead of time that yesterday was Blackout Tuesday, so we decided to move it today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Chris, introduce yourself. Tell people who you are, why you're here, why you're important. I'm going to change my glasses. I put these glasses on, and all I see is a reflection of my screen.
Yeah, I
See
can tell you
what
a
happens
secret
when
to
you try
that.
to be fashionable.
If your glasses are super smudgy, then they don't reflect anything. So mine are
There you go.
mine are in a deep need of cleaning. Yeah, I'm Chris Brogan. I do a bunch of things, and that's a pretty good list. I write books. I consult with companies about mostly marketing and how to be human at a distance. I came up with this thing called the Story Leader System, which is basically how do you make business writing? How do you do business storytelling in such a way that companies can get a better sense of things, better connection to the people that they're hoping to serve? Because I think that we've been so disconnected for so long. So that's the kind of work I do. It's basically saw, if you looked at those old Richard Scarry books where they'd show like the firefighter and the spaceship pilot and the milk delivery person and all that, I basically would be the guy on the typewriter in every single one of those pictures.
All right, cool. So I want to let's jump right into kind of about yesterday when you talk about
Yeah.
working with brands and being more human. I've noticed, and it's really interesting. I think I'm like a passive antagonistic person, and I pick my spots, but when I do land something, I usually end up pissing people off. It's interesting. I really enjoyed a lot of your tweets over the last couple of days. I'm paraphrasing because I don't do that much research for these shows. I'm a busy guy. But there was a tweet that you posted about, hey, if brands are giving you grief about your Black Lives Matters or COVID tweets, do you really want to work with these type of brands and things like that? And I thought that was really interesting from a personal perspective. And I also thought it was really interesting some of the corporate conversations that went on online. Of course, like, I don't know how Ben and Jerry's always is on the right side of history. It seems like they never make a wrong step, and they're always like, it's like they've got their thumb on the pulse of like the world. They're such a company that should be admired, not only for their product. I don't actually eat Ben and Jerry's. I don't eat ice cream. So you can see my body's a temple, but man, are they a brand that should be respected. So what did you think of yesterday from a human standpoint, a business standpoint, and really just any other comments?
So first off, there is a very now old book called The Inside Scoop, which is the biography of Ben and Jerry's, or the business biography of Ben and Jerry's. I read it years ago and was in love. I'm a New Englander. I'm a guy from Maine originally who lives in Massachusetts now. Ben and Jerry's is Vermont. Um, Vermont is a very specific kind of people. They're very rugged. Kind of like Maine, they have this sort of sense of people who are from away and people who aren't. There's a tribalism. They call their people, they call anti-Vermonters Flatlanders. But Ben and Jerry were like these hippies, and they were super into wanting to make this ice cream back in like the way old days or something, the 70s or something. And their real basic premise was super high fat content because ice cream was kind of still trying to pretend it was healthy. And they were like, it's not healthy. Like, let's make it fatty and delicious. And then also thick chunks, because whenever they'd go and get ice cream from some other brand, it would say chocolate chip, but it would be more like chocolate microbe fragments. And so they said, we're going to make blenders that make this ice cream into something insane. And so right out of the gate, they sold an insane product and everyone loved it. And there were very, the struggles in the book, if you read the book, the struggles are not like making an incredible product that people wanted. It was like, political stuff and all that. So they've been on the right side of history forever, because they're really truly like kind of hippie business that even when it corporatized, and even though it's been bought, and whatever, it still really maintains its board, and everybody else is really kind of tight to that. So that's a quick side note. what I thought of yesterday. So yesterday, we're in the middle of Black Lives Matter protests right now for some very good reasons, just because the ticker on police brutality has been kind of intense lately. It's been a lot of names after another, and a lot of unresolved legal proceedings. There's a lot of situations where someone's getting murdered, and you can witness a murder and no one's still charged for it. One guy is charged, 3 guys are free. It's a mess. So if you're a brand, any brand, but especially kind of like a brand of the people kind of brand, this is like horrible third rail stuff. This is the last thing you want to talk about, because you're thinking, oh my gosh, someone's going to be mad at us for this or whatever. But I have an opinion that's sort of based on a lot of information that I've been reading, which is that there's a shift in the way humans buy that's different the last few years, that we buy a lot more based on value alignment than anything else. And when I say that, I don't mean value like cost. I mean value like what people believe in. Millennials, Gen Z, and some of the other groups that are kind of below us in the Gen X category are doing this more and more and more every day. I'm just talking to this young lady, Sydney Nelson, who got a brand new job, kind of a dream sort of job, and they were not doing really good by their employees for social distancing inside the company, and she quit. She just said, you know what, I don't need this job as much as I need my health, and you're not in alignment with treating your employees like they matter. I'm out. And so I think that what I saw a lot of companies doing, well, first off, there's the funny thing to comment about the super lazy marketing of the world. One company decides to do white text on black background and make a very somber statement that follows a very specific pattern, and then puts their logo at the bottom, and then they all do it. Slight variation for Starbucks, they do theirs in green, and they get called out for it. A bunch of people say, thanks for your statement, thanks for your Black Lives Matter. Can I see the picture of your board of directors? Can I see photos of your board of directors? I like that call out a lot, because whether or not you say you support something, I mean, right now we're recording this in the middle of Pride Month. This is like such a confluence of, things that companies still don't fully know how to deal with. I feel that this is the golden opportunity, Saul, for companies to kind of rebuild their business, the way they approach the world, such that they can say they're into it. I'll give you the one example. You'll appreciate this because of your lifelong passion for Nike. Nike was one of the people that didn't get made fun of for it. Nike's entire messaging around this was, it had been known. I mean, they sunk a lot of investment into Colin Kaepernick, and it was known what their position was going to be, and they still did enough to make people feel really good. So anyway,
Cindy Gallup did call out Nike for not having a black CEO, and I think that's interesting, because I really like the board member angle of things, because board members are people with amazing experience, and you can bring them in, and it's a lot easier to bring in a board member than it is to bring in like a CEO that really understands the whole company and things like that. But I do find that I haven't fully formed my thought on this.
Okay.
I want much greater female representation in executive suites. I want much more people of color representation in C-suites and boards and things like that. But I also don't want it to get to the point, and I hope I don't come off as ignorant here. I don't want it to come off as the Rooney Rule in the NFL. I don't know if you're familiar with the Rooney Rule, but basically the Rooney Rule states that before you hire any NFL coach, you have to interview 2 people of color. You don't have to hire them. It's just kind of like a dance you do.
Yeah.
So they march in 2 black people as head coach, and maybe they hire one, or maybe they don't. But you can't make a hire unless you interview 2 black people. And
Right.
Obviously, I'm not a person of color. I would love to hear, from somebody who's a little bit more, invested in this than I, but I almost think like the Rooney Rule, the fact that you have to tell people to go through the dance is more insulting than just not hiring like a black person or something like that. So it's like, hey, we've got, the person we want to absolutely hire for this job, but find me a couple people that I can just make everyone else feel good, and let's get a picture of him walking through the door, sort of thing. It seems so much more disingenuous than just like not hiring a black person.
It's I agree with you, and I've that is a really tough line to dance, because that was the argument back and forth about affirmative action. Was it helpful, or was it, was it just something you had to, there's always a way to dodge any system. And I think that's a challenge.
Mhm.
And I don't know the answer. I mean, we need a better guest than either you or I to talk about that in a good way. But, let's do what two white guys do, which is, theorize. I think that the opportunity, to see more people comes from just keep asking, keep showing the photo, the 49ers tried to protest, and they were the ones who kind of famously weren't especially good to Colin Kaepernick. So, they got attacked by a lot of people. Calling out that sort of, calling out those moments where, what you're saying doesn't in any way match your actions is a super important part. And then I think I've been thinking about this kind of nonstop, Saul, which is that Cuban Americans, I use Cuban American examples so often as a group who did something really interesting when they came to America. They set up kind of a beachhead, so to speak, in Miami, and they built a few small Cuban lending entities. And those Cuban entities lent only pretty much to Cuban business owners or aspiring Cuban business owners. And then those businesses would promise to bank with them. And so they kept their money really tight in the community. And you probably saw the speech in Atlanta from Killer Mike a little while back. And, Killer Mike's a kind of known entity on this world. I saw him do a thing where he tried to put all of his dollars I can't remember if it was a week or just one day, into only black owned businesses, and how hard that was. Well, I think there's something to it. Now there's white people who will pay attention to this in Twitch and be like, well, that's the opposite. It's not. Like, it's just so inconsequential, the volume right now, that it's not there's so much restitution that has to happen anyway, that this is one way. And I think that a sense of sort of tribalism of kind of supporting and growing their financial opportunities and business opportunities would help a lot. It's just a thought.
Okay, let's talk about something else. There's a lot of things I want to go through with you. So the fact that we're even talking right now, and the fact that we're using this, piece of software to talk together, is I basically stole this idea from you.
Sure.
You've been doing a regular, almost daily 10 a.m. kind of Facebook Live show called Catch Up. And there's kind of no agenda. You just invite friends on. It's not a marketing show, and it's not a social media show. It's kind of like you're literally just catching up with people. I love this idea so much. You were grateful to have me on the show. Part of me having you on the show is you're one of the most giving people I know. And during, your show Catch Up, you almost never talk about yourself. So, part of me having you here, I wanted, to put a little spotlight and shine on you, but, talk about where the idea came from. Why are you doing it?
So Catch Up is a series inside a series. I launched at sort of the beginning of the coronavirus quarantine. I launched a show on Facebook Live called Point of Contact, in which I would come every weekday at 10 a.m. But I was so bad at the beginning, but my mom really kind of pushed me into it. She was like, look, where are you? Where are you? I would get text if I was 3 minutes late. So I was like, okay, fine. Called Point of Contact. And the reason is I Googled antonyms for isolation and quarantine, and the answer was contact. And I was like, oh, duh. So Point of Contact became the name. And I just wanted, you
could have called me. I would have told you to call it Proof of Life.
Oh, I like that too. I very much, actually, that's a whole side conversation. I very much wanted to do something different, because I immediately saw my marketing friends rush to make marketing shows, and rush to make like knowledge shows, and rush to make like info products out of it all. And I sell informational products. I'm not like, pooping on that space. It's fine. I sell one of my primary businesses, Owner Media Group, sells webinars and courses. Right. But that's not, people in quarantine are like, oh, wow, I'm really locked in my house. I can't wait to watch more webinars. So I thought, wouldn't it be neat if I just did a show where I just kind of gave my thoughts and ideas? So before it was Catch Up, I was doing a lot of this Point of Contact, but this app that we're using, StreamYard, my friend Carrie Gorgon, our mutual friend Carrie Gorgon,
Mhm.
uses StreamYard, and she uses it for Marketing Prof show. And so she said, "You've really got to try it." Well, I'm real good friends with the guys from Ecamm Live. They work in my town. They live right near me. And so this feels a little like using the enemy's tool in that way. But it works really well. It works really fast. It's perfectly simple as anything for a guest. And I wanted to try it. So the reason to try it was, oh, I'll do this catch-up show. I made Carrie my first guest because I knew she was kind enough that if I messed up the interview somehow, she would be cool with it because she knew I was new to StreamYard and all that. And then I've just since, I don't even have a scheduling method. I just basically message people when I think of them. And that's what I like about the show too, is it's really legitimately me catching up. So I have a friend, Tara Winston. She'll be my guest tomorrow. She's down in South Carolina, I think right now, helping out her dad. And the next day is Sydney Nelson, Angus Nelson's of the Nelson twins fame, if you know them. Angus's 21 or so year old daughter. She might be 22 now. Time passes, it turns out. And we're going to talk about like her most recent business experiences, but not in like an instructional way, just like we're going to catch up. Today's show, I went to the kitchen and made myself cold brewed coffee because I knew that we were going to hang out and I wanted to look sort of studio-y. So I just dragged the laptop to the kitchen and talked to people while I made coffee and put some rice in the rice cooker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the fact that you're doing a show just to talk to people. It's interesting. The whole purpose of me doing my podcast, and this will be repurposed as a podcast too, is to kind of just like I just wanted a reason to reach out to people, and people I either already know and respect a great deal, people who I want to be better friends with, or people I've admired from afar for a long time. So it's like I've used this as a platform to reach out to people I've watched on television forever,
Right.
and wanted to talk to. And next week, this is like such a weird kind of out of nowhere name that I expect no one to even know, but on Monday, right here live on Facebook Live, I'm going to be interviewing Bill Boggs.
Whoa.
So Bill Boggs, yeah. So Bill Boggs is like, in the 80s and 90s, he interviewed, he had Midday with Bill Boggs and Corner Table with Bill Boggs, and interviewed Sinatra and Burt Reynolds and John Belushi, Richard Pryor, all these guys. A lot of these guys are just sitting at home hoping somebody will give them somewhere to talk. So I'm actually like kind of really looking forward to that. Like there's got to be, I'm hoping there's 100 great celebrity stories that'll come out of that. But I guarantee if I just reached out to Bill Boggs and said, "Hey, you want to hop on the phone? I used to watch you on TV." Yeah. Ain't gonna happen. But you say Facebook Live, all of a sudden, they get their hair done and stuff like that.
That's
it's a random name from nowhere.
Yeah, that was really random. But I tweeted a month or so ago. I tweeted that at any given time, about 90% of Hollywood is unemployed, and I said, and actually that number is higher right now. You'd be amazed who you could get for a quick business project. If you reached out. I mean, I like almost all those dudes have no work right now, and so anybody who's not mentioning it is somebody who can connect. Hi, Chloe, by the way. But it's very much like a buyer's market, so to speak. But I bet Bill Boggs was very honored.
Yeah, I have been on a 1-year mission. I'm treading the line between trying to get him on my podcast, not Bill Boggs, I'll say who it is in a second, and not getting a restraining order. But I've been really pursuing hard to get Bobcat Goldthwait on my podcast, because I fucking love him. He's brilliant and a genius. I've met him a few times. We've talked a couple times through Instagram Messenger. But every time I sort of like veer into the, "Hey, you should be on my podcast," the conversation just ends right there. So I need to like send him an edible arrangement or something.
Does he have a charity?
I think his charity is feeding himself and keeping like work going through.
He's a working guy.
Like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
But, yeah. But yeah, no, I think there's so much value in having these conversations. So, you know, one of these things, you know, and one of the things you know, we've had a zillion conversations over thing, and
Yeah.
one of the recurring themes about you, and something I've always like really admired a great deal, is one, you don't sugarcoat a lot of stuff, you don't
No.
hide a lot of stuff. You've been very, very open and honest about your own sort of, you know, ups and downs with depression. Yesterday, it was either yesterday or this morning, I saw you post something about depression on Facebook and talking about, you know, we're sort of in the perfect storm of depression between, you know, all the protests and the looting and Black Lives Matter and COVID, and you know, we're just, you know, we're in this infinite cycle of, you know, triggering people in many different directions. And you laid out,
Right.
you know, 5 or 6 things people could do to sort of, you know, help themselves get through it. I'd love you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's I think I think I started talking about it openly around 2012 or so. So if you go to like chrisbrogan.com/depression, you'll find some old stuff, you'll find some videos. I talk about it a lot. And it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to sort of be known about sideways. You know what I mean? It's people now say in circles, you know, oh, you need someone to talk about depression? Talk to Brogan. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be the depression guy. You know, like that is not who gets invited to cool parties. That is not, you know,
It's how you brand it. You have to brand it the Great Depression.
I won't be on Hoda and Kathy Lee or whatever anytime soon. So, you know, I think that I'm not weeping, but I would say that what's gone on, like yesterday, what I said was just that, you know, there's so many people kind of showing up on my island. Like I've been here a while. I deal with depression all the time. I have a chemical depression. It's called major clinical depression, but I have a mild case of major clinical depression, minor case. That's what we always say, a minor case of major clinical depression. But it's a lot similar. Like dealing with this is a lot similar to the kind of temporary depression that a lot of people are feeling. And so I just figured I can help everyone. I suddenly have a superpower that I didn't have, because I can just tell you how I deal with my depression on a regular basis, and you could use it for your kind of temporary depression. So many people, I've had all these conversations privately as well, where I'll jump on a phone call with someone and I will say, hey, I'm just checking in because I saw a couple of your posts. I thought they were a little, you know, twitchy. And I know you didn't say anything about it. I just want to know how you're doing. And 100% of those calls, the next thing after is that person crying. And it's not like I like to make people cry, but humans love to feel seen and wanted. It's one of our greatest needs, is the need to feel wanted. And I think that we're holding it in so hard, right? Like we're holding it in for our kids. We're holding it in for our significant other. We're holding it in for work, right? But it's got to go somewhere. And so to me, it's this opportunity for me to say, and I'm always like this person that's like way outside their normal friend base. If you called me and said, I'm feeling depressed, we'd talk, because you could do that every day that ends in a Y. Like it's totally like, it would make sense. But I'm talking to people I don't normally talk with, but that I'm like Facebook friends or some other kind of like extended family. And what makes that useful is that these people, they can't talk to their significant other about it. They definitely can't talk to their kid. They don't want to call a therapist, or the therapist is like 8 months out with way more intense things going on because the suicide rate's going insane right now. And so I just like sneak it back in. And so what happens is I'll talk to them about some very practical things they can do about depression, which is really different than just letting someone feel sad. You know what I mean? And when I say practical, one of the things that I'm working on is that I just want to show people that, you know, you have to switch gears. You have to realize you're kind of driving around with the emergency brake on. And most of all, you have to give yourself so much permission. That's the big change. The big change is that people are like, oh, well, I didn't shower today. I showered yesterday. And I'm like, yesterday? You amateur. Get back to me when you're thinking about a week, right? And people will say, you know, my kids haven't gone out, or my kids are just glued to the screen because they just don't have any energy to take them for a walk. Where are you going to go? It's Quarantine Planet. And now it's Riot and Quarantine Planet. Where do you want to take them? Which Riot will we visit today, kids? Like, it's not, you know, people just like really work themselves up, and dumb things. I didn't do the laundry. I have a stack of laundry here that could be a Smithsonian exhibit at this point. And it's just because all I have to do is get this shirt, my gray shirt, a couple of pairs of shorts. That's it. That's all I've worn 70 something days and counting. Because who cares? That's why. That's why. If you see this shirt on almost every video I make, it's because I've got 2 shirts I'm wearing over and over and over again and laundering just one tiny batch and not dealing with the other stuff because I don't have to right now. It's not going to change my world. So I just show these things to people. I just say, look, there's stuff going on. There's so much heavy stuff going on. Let me just help you. Let me just give you a couple of ways that you can kind of walk your way through it. And make it like not a big deal. The most important thing to keep sharing about things like depression and mental health in general, it's not a giant deal most of the time. Yes, sometimes you definitely need meds. Meds are great, and it takes a really long time to find the right ones. But you also just need to understand that it's okay, and that's important. Danielle said that she found me through a World Domination Summit, probably my superhero speech. And so I think that's, or the Depression as a CEO. I can't remember if I spoke there twice. I probably did. But I most definitely, it's an important thing to cover a lot because I just kind of want to keep giving people, we talk about representation in films and stuff like that, going back to things like Black Lives Matter, putting Shuri on the screen in Black Panther as like this great scientist does a lot. Suddenly women in science in general went up and people of color in science went up immensely, just like way back in the day, Uhura. So when I talk about depression in business, I want to remove excuses from you so that you can go and, be willing to be the boss you can be, even when you deal with depression. So that's my ramble on that kind of stuff.
But do you think that the mindset is that people can be honest publicly about things? Because, we still have well, let me rephrase what I'm going to say. Right now, there's probably more candidates available for any job than there's been in forever, with all the layoffs, furloughs, and all those sort of things. And when, I've had this conversation with a few people, when it comes to myself, I've never been approached by a recruiter ever. I don't do well whenever I apply for things. So I just do my own work and, find my own clients and just keep my head down and cash checks and keep clients happy and stuff like that. But I would have to wonder if, before, if an HR person is going to be presented with 100 great candidates and now they're presented with 17,000 great candidates. Of course, I'm making up numbers. Any decent job gets like 5,000 people and it's all scanned by AI and like it's all BS and nonsense anyways. But if they're doing their mild cursory social media review of a candidate, there's a lot of easy ways for them just to eliminate people by just them saying, hey, I had a shitty day, I'm gonna go cry for 3 hours and stuff like that. So I think, and there's all this nonsense about masks and being more open and honest and stuff like that. I still don't think people are prepared or willing to do that. Like, I know even myself, there's 3 people in the world that know all my secrets. And I'm very fortunate that I even have 3 people that I can speak openly and honestly to and stuff like that. But, it's like, if we've met twice, you're going to get sort of the persona Saul, and slowly it chips away into like sort of the real Saul. One of my best friends in the world, she calls it, there's red glasses Saul, and then there's not red glasses Saul, and stuff like that. So and like I share a lot of stuff on the internet because I'm kind of not ever looking to I kind of don't worry about what people think about me anymore. I'm not, I don't have FU money. I don't have financial independence. I do need to work and all those things. So, maybe the tiniest bit of my brain says, ooh, geez, I wonder if that'll bite me in the ass. But like, shit, there's so much fucking stupid shit I've said over the last 10 years on Twitter that if anybody was really interested, like, there's some good fodder there. And even, one of my favorite things is Facebook on this day. And you see like what he said 12 years ago. So it's like it was never anything racist or anything like that. I don't have that, gene in me, but man, was I stupid 12 years ago. It's just like there's so many like things that I thought were important. It's like, signing off for the day to go eat a tuna sandwich and stuff like that. Like it's hopefully I'm a little bit more thoughtful now, but I still don't know if we're at a place where people are going to be fully open and honest and stuff like that. Like you're never going to see, so a perfect example. Okay, I'm doing this charity thing right now with Planned Parenthood. I
Mm-hmm.
love Planned Parenthood because I love women, I love vaginas, I'm all in. And I'm trying to raise some money for them. And man, did I get beaten up by people who are anti-abortion and stuff like that. And
Sure.
like I just sort of I shake it off because I've been getting grief from people for a decade now. You've been getting grief from people for a decade now. I'd love to kind of hear sort of your thoughts on or just how do you deal with grief and not let it get to you, because I just completely discount everything. I look where it's coming from, and I sort of know from looking at enough political campaigns and things over the year, you can't really change people's minds. So I stand firm on my beliefs. I explain why it's important to me. I defend my position, but I'm really not trying to convince anybody at this point, because I don't think you can convince people.
No, my so I converted in 2012 to Buddhism, and when I say converted, I don't treat it like a religion. I treat it like kind of like a functional operating system. I was born and raised Catholic, but I gave that up for Lent. So I have no particular religious affiliation.
Heyo.
Yeah, hey-o. I have no particular religious affiliation, but I do like to say that I love God. I don't really like her fans, because that is probably the closest I get to who I am. I think there's probably some kind of energy or system in the universe that kind of puts a little bit of a spin on the ball, but I don't have enough of an argument for it, right? But I say that to say, when I talk about Buddhism and all that, I have become more Buddhist in this quarantine than I ever have been. And when I say that, again, I mean the practice, not the religion. Like I can't tell you crap about what happened, like with the original Buddha walking around on the road telling people to kill me and stuff. I can tell you that what I mean is releasing myself. This goes back to your thing about people saying bad things or not. I never look for praise or criticism, because they're both poison. If you have too much praise, you tend to, change yourself to aim at that praise, which isn't really being you. And I don't look at criticism, because critics almost always are people that don't buy my service. Critics are people who want to talk negatively about me because they're upset or jealous, or, I'm doing it wrong. I used to trend really well in Google search for "you're doing it wrong." And I think that that's one of my favorite rankings. It's been a long time since. With Buddhism, the thing I keep learning is that thing about letting go of praise and criticism, letting go of everything as best I can, which is the hardest thing on the planet. Sort of detangling from people's expectations, which is hard. And the other one is just flow, right? So flow is one of the most important tools that we could use right now, because we're building on sand. Like there is no new normal. Like there was a new normal for like 40 minutes 4 days ago, and then that went away. So there's no new normal yet. And people, I keep seeing right now people forgetting that there's still a quarantine on. So they're going out for their protests and all that, no masks except to hide from cops. And like the masks come off at these weird moments, and like definitely not 6 feet or 2 meters space between people. I would say that, I feel that the world is still in a weird ass place. And I think that, as it ties to your question about like how I deal with companies about that, is the world ready for weirdness and all that? I think a few things. One is, I think that it doesn't matter if they're ready, because it is, you know what I mean? Like birth comes when birth comes. That's the coolest thing about birth, is that, to quote a very famous Western doctor, Ian Malcolm, life finds a way. And so I would say that there's value in thinking about that, right? There's value in thinking about the fact that things are just going to happen. So there is a line from Serge Tankian, a person in LA, not that far from Cantor's, by the way, because he's one of the nice Armenian gentlemen. The spirit moves through all things. And I think that our business restructuring, such as it were, that needs to happen. This will circle to Chloe's question too about, do I help people with depression in the workplace? No one's ever asked for it. Like 0 people have ever taken me up on it. Most HR departments, when I queried them about this, said, oh my gosh, this is the third rail. We don't want to touch it. But what I've decided is the kind of people who deal with depression and have to go to a workplace will find me. And so I think that we will find our way to this new world. And I think that also by extension, companies will exclude themselves from wanting to interact with people like me or people like you or people who want to say things a certain way. Disney, I've worked for Disney a bunch of times over a bunch of years. I think I'm a little too political for Disney at this point, not because I have anything critical to say about them. I love their organization. I met with Bob Iger. I interviewed the man. I think in general, for flaws aside here and there, I think they, create an interesting product. And I would say that there's value in a lot of companies that people hate, and there's value in a lot of companies that people love, and there's problems in companies that people love and hate, right? So we have to sort of find where we want to grow a little bit of roots, but we also have to be willing to like replant ourselves a lot more than we ever used to in the old days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny you talk about kind of jealousy and not really not going for praise or anything like that. I forgot my question. Let's move on. Hey, I posted up Chloe's question. You sort of touched on it. Do you want to go a little deeper in it, or you want me to keep rolling?
Whatever makes you cheery. I would say that one of the things I noticed was that all these people dealing with work from home, it's so stressful to do work from home. It is so stressful for, suddenly there may or may not be two people in a home. Let's remember that every home is different. There's a lot of single parents in the world, a lot of divorced parents in the world. But suddenly there's more than one, adult entity at home. There may or may not be more than two child entities in the home. They're all on Zoom at the same time now. There's all this blather because, school is remote. There's all this stuff happening. And this amps everybody's anxiety and depression. But companies didn't know how to deal with work from home way before a quarantine. And they most definitely don't know how to deal with the emotions of working from home. And they particularly, all the companies I know, except for maybe wellness companies, and maybe they're just as bad, I just don't know any, they want so hard to pretend that you are a good working cog. This wall behind me, this building I'm in, is a factory. And it used to build the upholstery that went on horse-drawn carriages before there were cars in America. And this factory was run with child labor. It was also the location of the first non-union child walkout because one too many kids got stuck in the little grinders and they decided, I'm going to maybe not, work here anymore. And so they protested. And so I live in a building that was part of a protest. So I see this world, and I see this world of what used to be. I have ducts and beams and all this from a factory that doesn't exist. I'm from Maine, where we had all the pine trees that you would ever imagine. It's called the Pine Tree State. But it became cheaper to buy paper from places in Asia and have it shipped than it was to process the paper here in the States. And so as businesses keep changing, they're trying harder and harder to keep us in that sort of 1940s cog building system. And it's just not going to work that way. And I think that that's what drives so much depression, is because every time there's a misalignment and every time there's no flow, there's a problem, right? If you need to be home with your kid and the business is basically saying no, then that's a problem. If you are home with your kid and your business doesn't know how to manage you, so they're expecting sort of, it used to be butt and chair management if you were at the office, but now it's butt on video management. I think that's a problem. So there's a lot to work on, but it'll be interesting to see where that all gets handled.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting because I don't think we're going to be back in offices ever again the way we normally are. I think companies are going to realize that they never need 1 million square feet again. It's ridiculous. There'll be some, fancy locations to have some fancy meetings and to entertain some people. But the idea of paying for commercial real estate to the extent they've been doing it right now is going to seem ridiculous and absurd. Hopefully there will be new titles and new roles created to manage people through like a work from home, if it's an HR or it's a leadership learning department or something like that. But I think companies are just going to see this as a real opportunity to get out of a lot of money, just like the way I think a lot of companies knee-jerked firing, layoffs, and furloughing because they're like, without even seeing what the world was going to be like in 2 weeks later, they're just like, well, let's just keep the money in the bank and did panic firing and to a certain extent, created the situation we're in right now. One thing I've noticed, and this sort of really plays into your history and your skill set. I don't remember how many years ago, I'm going to make up a number and say a decade ago, you wrote a pretty successful book called Trust Agents, where you talked about how companies need to develop trust and need to thing. I've been sort of shouting from the rooftops to not a whole lot of success. People just keep, saying, "Here's a cookie, go away."
Right.
But I think, man, is this the time for community management to come back as a real key part of your communication strategy? Like, if you lived through this, you and I, that's how we sort of built our careers at that time. We've if for nothing else, we've been able to sustain a career where a lot of people haven't been through the last 10-12 years. But community management, the way I remember it, and I'm so bad with timelines, but so correct me if any of these numbers don't seem to work, but it kind of seemed like 2008, 2009 to about 2012, brands actually wanted to talk to their users, their customers, and they wanted to create a much more human face to it. Then all of a sudden, growth hacking took over, and it was just easier to retarget people and all that shit. And all of a sudden, community management was like a black mark in your company and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But man, do we ever need humanity again? It's right now. And I'm surprised that, and you see Ben and Jerry's and Nike and Starbucks and all these companies are starting to release statements, but they haven't yet put a face to that yet. And I think that I've been advising many people to do that. It'll be interesting to see if that happens at all, because man, it just seems like this is the time.
It's an interesting time for a few reasons, though, Saul. One is that, because revenue is down everywhere, you and I are basically homeless, at this point, because there's just all the marketing revenue of the world vanished. All the experiment revenue where we get our money is gone. Lots of my friends are down 90+% of their revenue. Well, what's happened with companies is they're holding on to their marketing dollars right now, or spending them in the most 1960s of ways they possibly can, because they're saying, we just don't know what's going to happen. There's layoffs. We don't want to just spend our money on marketing. Well, we can't in any way. Like, there's not a whole lot of growth that happens without investment in growth. We said, we, the people of the land of social from back in those days and community, we said a good, strong community tool would really help. We said, really having connection to these people where you can message them back and forth. 10 years ago, because 10th anniversary of Trust Agents comes out this year, 1 year late of the anniversary, but that's my fault. The 10th anniversary of Trust Agents comes out because it is the perfect time for this to be true. But what's always happened, and what's happened more and more and more, is people confuse marketing automation for marketing. People confuse, if it doesn't fit in a spreadsheet, it's probably not worthwhile. People confuse, if we can't drive ourselves into the right kind of, spreadsheet box and make sure it's really clear what we're doing and how this directly gives ROI, it's because people spent so much money on so many dumb things that they're also pulled back, and now budget's pulled back, that I don't think it's going to come for a bit. I think it's ridiculously necessary. I think it'll be the least likely thing that we spend our money on. And the way people are buying right now, there's a lot, thank you, loud horn. There's a lot more buying based on values. There's a lot more buying based on trying to go for local first. There's a lot of people who are finally feeling that belly sick feeling of using Amazon as often as they do, which, by the way, before this old mess, I was buying Amazon almost for anything. I mean, there's no reason to ever try to go around finding stuff local, but I've been a little bit more in my belly about local dollars going to local stores because of this quarantine. So I just feel that there's a massive need that will absolutely not be met because of the fundamentals of finances and the fact that it's just not easy enough for people. We've gone from DIY to DIFY, and I think that people aren't really doing a good enough DIFY version of community or social platforms to make it worth it for anybody.
Well, that's why people should hire us. We have a question. Abby McGilvery. Let me move my little piece of paper here. What are the best virtual safe spaces to talk about these issues? I assume we're talking about depression and not community management. Are there any regular calls to join to get ideas about how to support people better? I throw that to you, Chris.
I don't know any. Nobody invites me anywhere. I would say that there's definitely some value to it. The thing is, and Abby, I've said this about things like social for a really long time. Being one of the most famous people in the world for social media, I malign and say negative things about social media as often as I can. I don't think that social media as a business is smart. I always told people don't do it. I don't think companies named social media companies make sense to me. I always say you might as well just call yourself a fax marketing company. It's the same thing, which I stole from, why can't I think of his name? Aaron. I'm not going to remember his last name. Anyway, no. So what I think is if it becomes a depression group, no one goes because that sounds depressing. If it becomes, a work from home kind of group, then maybe there's something there. You always have to kind of what's the flag you can go to instead of the one from. And so no one's like, I can't wait to be depressed. So you have to think of what's the one forward. So I'm looking at, how do we make, the ultimate work from home experience or something. My next book will be called The Backpack, because of that sense of nomadic living that we do when we're working remotely, and the fact that, everything that the world's just too big and we need to fit it into something smaller. So a backpack's a good analogy. And I think that that's how that works, Abby. I think we have to I always say this, like we have to hide the broccoli inside the cake. People need broccoli. If the best diet book in the world would be just like eat some broccoli, you fat ass. But no one would buy it because no one wants it. But I would say that if we hide the broccoli in the cake in this particular experience, what you get is, how to thrive when you're remote and that sort of a thing. And I think that's one secret way into getting people to talk about and understand their depression and some of their mental health.
Okay, so sort of on the same theme, but getting away from it. Something I've wanted to ask you forever, and I don't think I've ever talked about it. We've sort of hinted, we've sustained a career, however you want to, justify our existence, whatever.
Yeah.
But we're still around when a lot of people aren't. Going on 12 years doing this. You ever get tired of it all?
That's a great question. My old boss, Dave, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? It's like the most basic name in the world. Johnson. My old boss, Dave Johnson, was when I worked at the telephone company. When I worked at the phone company, everything was so ethereal. Like it was so you just so many technology jobs you have are basically you don't really exactly make something. You make an experience go through. You render a service, and there's no real legacy. Like no one goes, "Wow, that's what Dave built." And Dave was he was one of my 3 favorite bosses ever. And he said his fantasy, like he goes, I will sit sometimes in my office. If you ever go and see me rubbing my eyes are closed or something, I'll be sitting thinking about just having a popcorn cart and walking it around the lake and events and stuff like that and just selling pretty good popcorn. He goes, I think it would be so cool. And every now and again, I think about things like that. This kid I went to high school with, Pat, my school, so I had come down from Maine. I knew nobody and nobody liked me at my new high school. Everybody was rich as hell. Their dads were all vice presidents in companies like Raytheon and all that. Their dads built missiles for a living. And on graduation, everybody had a brand new Mustang out front, except for me and Pat. I got a Macintosh computer, which just pretty much explains my life in a nutshell. And Pat bought himself a black BMW. Whereas all those Mustangs came from Jen Nasser's father, Nasser Ford, and they were all like leases and stuff like that. They were all like fake ownership. And all the Mustangs were like, no kid did anything to earn it. Pat had a black shining BMW. And I said, dude, what happened here? What'd you do? He said, oh, well, for the last 2.5 years, no one knew it, but I was a trash guy. I said, sorry. He goes, yeah, like guy on a truck picking up trash bags. That was me. That was my job. And I would do it before school. And sometimes I'd do it a little bit after school. And I made so much money, I bought myself a BMW cash. And I think about Pat about once a week. I think, man, that guy just did trash. and it was an important service. There's always going to be trash, and at some point we'll have robots that can do it all, but it's still a human business, even with those like machines that chuck the bins now. And I would say that that's not my fantasy. I don't really want to drive a trash truck, but I definitely think a lot more about mundane world services. I was just thinking about it in the kitchen this morning. I'm pouring myself my coffee. I'm sitting in the kitchen. I'm thinking, what would I sell if any of this wasn't for me anymore? Like, what could I really want to put my face around? I don't have the answer yet, but I think about it all the time. And not because I'm sick of this or anything like that. I'm not tired. I'll write books until I'm dead, even if I have some really weird ass mundane job. But I feel that the business of selling ideas is one of the sort of least satisfying some days than any other business you could ever do. Because so many times, like, I've given the biggest companies in the world my thoughts and they've sent me the check, and I'm so grateful for the check, but they've almost never implemented the thoughts. They just kind of incorporated them into something they did later. I can't point to something like you can and say, well, when FreshBooks did this, they did this with me. I've got none of those. So I don't know. I do get tired of it sometimes. I don't get tired of talking. I don't get tired of being on video. I don't get tired of like the interaction. But I do get tired of the distance between what I believe the world could be and where people end up wanting me to be instead.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's worse than not being able to point to work you've done and say, like, that was my idea.
I know, right? What you're going to say.
I've experienced recently clients who won't pay me to execute the idea, and the execution is so bad that I won't even like promote it or point to it and say that was me, because they'll be like, good for you. Here's a cookie. So
that was an argument
Mr.
I got
Chris
years ago. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm looking.
No, please tell your story.
Years ago, I met Charlene Lee for the first time, and I've looked up to Charlene for a billion years before that, and we met in the hallways of South by Southwest. She says, I think you are a really good guy, and I really like some of what you're doing. And she said, but I think you are stupid. And I was like, wow, that's a good first meeting. Like, I've never met you before, and I kind of idolize you. You should definitely call me stupid. And I said, okay, so in what way? She goes, you should just sell the idea and not the implementation. It's really dumb not to break it apart like that. And I said, I can't abide the idea that someone would do such a bad job with my implementation. And I don't think they'd pay me as much, because if the other person fails, then they'll blame my idea and I'll blame their implementation. So that's why I do it. And so you just said that, and I was like, yes, you and me versus the world, and mostly Charlene Lee. But she's a lovely person. It was just how she's just very straightforward.
Oh, no, there's a million ways to do what I do far easier.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm relentlessly stubborn to make sure that I'm going to be proud of it at the end. And so it's, you talk about, with your Buddhist beliefs on how, sort of like, ignore the praise and ignore the criticism. My barometer for everything is, am I proud of it? And if I'm proud of it, I don't really give a shit if you don't like it. I've had, you've probably said these exact same words, or maybe you just you're not as blunt as I am. And maybe that's, why we're able to talk right now, because we don't have work. But, but I've said 1,000 times to clients when they say, it's like all these people are shitting us on the internet. I'm like, they're not customers. What do you care? And like, it's so hard for people to look through that lens. It's like, if people like, I don't know, just they're not your target market. So, it's do you think all these Black Lives Matters people are trying to convert these white supremacists to their way of thinking? No, it's like they're trying to, coexist or whatever. I don't know, bad example, but anyways, they're not customers. Don't worry about it.
Well, willing allies are their customer, right? So the Black Lives Matters people are saying, look, there's still such a big problem here. We really need some help. And it's not going to come just from people of color. It's going to come from, white people helping amplify. And so it is definitely this scenario where you're right. They're not going to try to convince people like, in the white, far right white, it's just not going to be their right buyer. So, and it's always true. It's true that the loudest people are rarely the customer. There's a joke that Tom Segura makes in one of his Netflix specials where he's talking about. He goes, "Do you ever find yourself just like studying, like you want to pretend like you're buying something, and so you're on this web page for a long time?" He goes, "I was checking out this Gulfstream private jet, and I was thinking, well, this isn't really big enough for my whole family. Probably not really the right one for me." And he goes, "But I have that page bookmarked as if I'm someday going to swing back and pick that thing up." And we've talked about that with your Porsche too. He says, "That's not your buyer."
Mhm.
Basically he goes, "I'm just sort of, I don't know." He goes, "I don't know what I'm doing." And I think all the time about that, because I think there's people who have such strong opinions about certain brands, and they're either aspirants like you are with Porsche, or there's people
Mhm.
just shooting at anything that they want to shoot at. And that B category just isn't useful to anybody.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, sir. I appreciate your time. I do. I want to be respectful. I don't want. I could go another 2 hours, but I don't know if that's good for either one of us. Thank you so much for doing this. You are honestly one of my favorite people. I adore you. Please promote yourself. Get someone to buy a book or hire you for a workshop or something. I don't. We didn't even talk about speaking. It's so funny. It's like, man, has an industry been cannibalized?
Yeah,
And
oh yeah.
like, just a lot, there's a lot of people who used to make a whole lot of money being on airplanes every week, and now, like, gonna see some people have to figure out whole new career.
Yeah. Saul, I've seen a lot of friends of mine, and sort of lightweight version of that word as well, just really kind of scrambling because they were enamored of the business of speaking as if that was the beginning and ending of their business. And for years people kept saying to me, "Chris, that is what you should do. Like, you're an idiot. Like, just be a speaker." And I was like, "I don't know. It's like, it doesn't seem like the right idea. Like, if I don't keep my hands in the projects, what am I going to speak about eventually? I'll just be speaking on the edges of things." So as they're crumbling, I've at least got a few other kind of irons I can stick back in a fire here and there. Um,
Mhm.
but what I also am hearing is just so many people get so energetic about suddenly being the best virtual keynote speaker and all that. When you ask, "Do I ever get sick or tired of something?" That stuff just makes me apey. Like, cause I don't know. Speaking isn't some kind of super necessary thing. Sharing really important ideas is, and one way to do that is speaking and video and these kinds of talks. I mean, we get guys like Bob Farnham to show up here. This is the right kind of thing, right? So it, to me, Saul,
Mhm.
is this is what should we be doing right now. We should be finding these, and we should be getting up to 20, 40, 50, 100 people, and then they should be hosting, and we should come and swing by and see who their guests are. And I think we'd get so much more contact that way. I think we get so much work done. So thanks for having me on as a guest, man. It was the best.
Yeah, no, I you do so much for so many people, and you don't promote yourself as much as you. I'm a little shameless with my self promotion, and that's sort of the role I've created for myself. It But also I like to sort of put the spotlight on other people who aren't as shameless as I am. So I appreciate you making the time, sharing your ideas. You're brilliant. Last kind of thought, and then we'll send you on your day, just to tag something you had just said about the best virtual keynote speaker. um, I love speaking. Speaking on a stage is my drug. You get like my
Yes.
endorphins go up. All you stand on a stage, even if it's only 12 inches off the ground, you're all of a sudden the smartest person in the room. You're the sexiest person in the room. People you don't have to go talk to people at the end of the talk. People line up to talk to you. There's so many wonderful benefits mentally and physically about being on a stage. I don't need to deliver a Zoom keynote ever. I can talk to myself in the shower and it'll get the exact same sort of feeling for me. If somebody wants to pay me to do it, please call me. I'm happy to do it. But I am spending zero of my time trying to drum up speaking work right now, just to go in and talk to a bunch of people on Zoom, because first of all, like my whole speaking style is I drop some inappropriate jokes. I try to get reactions from people. I try to read the room. I try to push the limits as far as you can. And man, there's just no way to do it when like you've got 75 people staring at you in little boxes and their microphones are all muted, and you make you drop a quick little joke that should offend half the room on purpose, and you have no idea what they're like, what the deal is there. Like it just good for you, for not you but in general, good for you if you're seeking this stuff out. But man, like all the pleasure of being on a stage and stuff like that, it just doesn't translate for me.
It's look, I always wanted to be Van Halen. I always wanted to be Metallica. I always wanted to be, and I play guitar reasonably well, about as well as to get a date. That's about as far as I ever wanted to learn. And so speaking has afforded me the opportunity to, like you say, be the sexy guy in the room, which is I'm picked last for gym class guy. So it's a fun experience for me, but it's never, it's like that old Lance Armstrong book. It's not about the bike. He was right. It was about the enhancements, but it's definitely, we're both lucky to have the life that we are building, even on our worst days. So let's go have a bad day fishing, and thank you for having me in to chat.
Okay, thank you so much. For more information about me, go to theideaintegration.com. Chris, I appreciate you.